Hey, at least John Fisher got what he wanted, and Aaron Judge homer.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, A's fans, and welcome to Locked On A's. This is the podcast. We talk about your Oakland A's, well, as long as they're there and for the rest of this season. I am your host, and it looks like I'm going to be the host for a while, and I can tell you something, I'm having a lot of fun doing this. My name is Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I've been an Emmy-nominated television producer, done a lot of different things, but I've been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now. This is my sixth full season here as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I also host Locked On MLB, and I'm still doing those shows each and every day. But for the next bunch of, well, as long as I can, I'm going to be hosting this show, Locked On A's. I want to make sure you A's fans have someone helping give you a voice. And if you're listening every day, do me a favor. Post, if you're going on social media, Locked On A's on Twitter or whatever it's called now, or Instagram, make sure, or if you're posting here on YouTube and you want to subscribe, use that hashtag EverydayA's so we know who's following us. Also, quick note, today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'm a competitive guy. You should know that by now. And it helps to be competitive when you play Monopoly Go. It's the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and on Google Play. Let me tell you what's going to happen today. This is going to be an interesting episode. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the frustrating game in New York. My God, they started the series with a win, and now and so many things could bounce this way or that because, okay, they lost the close game. There's some questionable calls. Then there was the game today, which just it felt like it should have been closer than it was. And now the game that's going to take place on Thursday is a true rubber game. Either the A's will have gone into New York and held their own, split the series, or they will have played the first 7 games of this road trip and have lost 6 of them. And then we're starting like, oh my God, can we have at least a few more weeks of fun before the inevitable happens? Can you just give us that? So, odd, but it's a big game tomorrow just for the psychology of hoping to go. You're hoping to at least get into May and not feel like the wheels are coming off. To not feel like the White Sox. But another interesting thing we're going to have on Dan Moore, who's a writer for The Ringer. And he wrote a fantastic article about fan protesting and basically fan advocacy and having fans have their voices heard, especially in situations like we're experiencing right now in Oakland, where the team is about to be taken away. We talked for a long while, and so it's going to be a 2-part interview. I'm going to play part of it today and part of it tomorrow. One snippet I'm also going to include on Locked On MLB. So if you subscribe to that show, you'll hear a segment there too. So segment 2 and 3, Dan Moore is going to be here, talk about his article and talk a little bit about the relevancy of the protests and the movement and the reverse boycott and everything. And some of the examples where that sort of fan uprising has worked. It isn't always futile. You're not always screaming at the tides. Let's just take a look at this. What happened today? So it looked like Judge had struck out, but it turns out Boyle was called for a balk, so he had to throw another pitch to Judge. I wish I could have gone to PrizePicks right then, right there, and bet everything I had on a Judge homer on the next pitch, because that's what happened. And the Yankees took that 2-0 lead, 2-0 between 4-0, 4-0 turned 5-0. But I do have to admit, when Rooker hit the 3-run home run, he hit the 3-run home run off of Schmidt, and suddenly a 5-0 game became a 5-3 game. I was like, oh, wait a second. I've seen games like this. I've seen games where everything falls apart, and then Rizzo is homered, and Soto hit that big, huge blast, and Weaver pitched very, very well out of the bullpen. Weaver look at I don't know what to say. I mean, he shut down that game because they got to Schmidt. Schmidt was pitching great until the sixth, hit the Rooker wall, and then Weaver came in, pitched 2 2/3, no hit innings, and he doesn't get a win, he doesn't get a save, but that he was the pitching star of that game. And you know what? Sometimes that happens. We knew this was not going to be an easy road trip, but you just hope when they won the first game and all they have to do is win one out of the next three, and the trip to New York would have been a smashing success. That's all it takes. And now here we go. So tomorrow's game starts. Is it not? It's a night game. I wasn't sure if it was a day game or not. Wood is pitching against Cortez. Oh joy! Wood's ERA has an area code on it, and Cortez is so far looking like a prime contender for comeback player of the year. And then after that, then on the weekend, the A's ship on off, and I believe they're playing Baltimore, right? Yeah, they're to Baltimore, and Burns will be pitching against Stripling. They got to win tomorrow. Otherwise, this road trip is already just unraveling. Just hold your own. Get to 10 and get that 10th win. Don't be one of these teams that's the Marlins are flopping on the deck. The White Sox look like they should be contracted. The Astros look bad, and the Astros lost again. And then the Angels, they win, they lose, they win, they lose. Today was a vintage Angels game because Mike Trout became the first major leaguer this year to hit double-digit homers. So naturally, the Angels lost. I don't want to see this road trip get out of control. That's all I want. I just want a road trip that is in control. So, I mean, there's not much to talk about that autopsy. So, we come back, we're going to talk to Dan Moore, and he's going to be giving his thoughts on the A's, the reverse protests, and everything happening in terms of fan advocacy, and give it back some of the power. We're not totally powerless. Sometimes it's worked. Policygenius is the nation's leading online marketplace for life insurance. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with financial safety nets starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Life can be unpredictable, and Policygenius can take away some of the worries of what your family would do if something happened. Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found it the best fit for your policy needs. Policygenius is where to go. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmlb or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. We've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if your team can pull out that win. And that's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless of Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and charge other players rent on your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and tournaments to get extra rewards to climb up the leaderboard. So get back in there now. Put on your game face and download Monopoly Go on the Google Play app or in your app store. Monopoly Go. Let's go for it. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. All right, Locked On A's and Locked On MLB fans, I'm really proud to bring aboard from The Ringer, wonderful writer, Mr. Dan Moore. How you doing, Dan? Thanks for joining our show.
Doing well, Sully. Thanks for having me on.
Before we dive into this fantastic article, which should be not only read by every A's fan, should be read by every baseball fan, and I think should be next to the Gideon Bible in every single hotel room across the country. Tell me, you've been writing for the contribute to the Ringer for how long?
Just a few years now. I've been covering Oakland sports, Bay Area sports for a bit longer than that, for rags like the Chronicle and Oakland Side magazine. But I've been contributing to the Ringer now for 2-3 years, I think. Yeah.
Well, since the death of Sports Illustrated, a place like the Ringer is absolutely essential for sports fans, where you could have an article like the one that you wrote, where you can do a deep dive beyond just a tweet or whatever it's called now, and just a headline. You can actually dig deeper into, beneath the fingernails, which used to be a great thrill I had growing up reading SI, which was not just the flashy headlines, but you could get deep into the narrative of a story. And on an article that you wrote just or it was published just last week, April 18th, called "When Fans Fight Back," and it tells the story of basically, the reverse boycott and everything that's been happening in Oakland, but also you put it in the context of previous historical, for the lack of a better word, if not fan revolts, then certainly fan protests of when owners start having the greed take over, and the fans could actually push back and sometimes have tremendous results.
That's right. Yeah. I got to go deep on it. You're right that is one tremendous benefit of places like the Ringer, that they still do that kind of, or they still support that sort of long form investigative magazine writing. I grew up loving Sports Illustrated, that ESPN the magazine, that sort of thing as well. And there aren't that many outlets that support that anymore. And so I'm grateful to the Ringer for giving me that chance. And I was grateful to the fans, of course, and to everyone who kind of let me pester them for months on end to learn more about this topic, because it's not one that you think about all that often when it comes to sports. We're always talking about the players, and when we're not talking about the players, we're talking about the owners and the money involved. But we forget that 50% of the equation are the people in the stands, the people who ostensibly these owners are playing for, or rather putting a product out on the field for. So I really enjoyed getting the chance to tell their story.
Well, one of the people that gets quoted here is friend of the podcast, Melissa Lockhart, who was a guest on the show just last week. But I have to say, I'm very glad that you brought up Brooklyn, and the Brooklyn Dodgers and what happened there, because I think that there was a fundamental change that happened in the 1950s because, first of all, there was a lot of population move in the post-war world, and the ability to fly coast to coast became something you could do within a day instead of having to stop off. There were several teams that were eyeing Los Angeles, and it became this close to being the Los Angeles Senators. But the fact that when the teams that were moving tended to be the teams that were fresh out of luck, and the city already was supporting another team, whether it was the A's, oddly because they were the better team over history, or the Browns, or the Braves. But the Dodgers were still a successful team, and there was a sense of betrayal, I think, in sports when the Dodgers moved. Like, how could a team 2 years removed from the championship still was a money-making team and everything like that? How do you move that? And I think from that moment there was a sense of the fan support means nothing, And your article argues it may feel like that, but don't give up hope. Maybe you do have more power than you think you do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Fans have more power than they think to do, especially when they're organized and when they work together in kind of a concerted effort to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve, whether it's keeping their team from relocating or lobbying local politicians to work a bit more conscientiously on their behalf, or whether it's giving owners a hard time.
Yeah.
I think that the key point of the article ultimately is that organization piece is crucial. And it's also something that's strange and peculiar about sports in America, that fans are not so systematically organized, and that owners possess all of the power, or rather all of the political capital, as it were, sort of at the onset. We mentioned before we hopped on the Super League in Europe, and how fans there effectively dismantled that within what's felt like hours after it was announced by the owners. And one reason they were able to do that is just because the fan culture there, or rather the sports culture, is so much more symbiotic and respectful of the conception of pro sports as fundamentally public goods, as community assets, as opposed to fundamentally capitalistic for-profit assets. And so I think that's the fissure.
For those of you who haven't read the whole 35-page article, and I have read every word of it. Actually, I read it twice. I read it this morning again just to brush up a little bit. Explain to them what was the Super League and what the problem with it was, because when I read about it, I said, "Oh, that sounds like Major League Baseball to me." So why don't you explain what the Super League was before we get back into the A's, but what the Super League was and why that was such a different animal in Europe.
The Super League was a proposed, effectively closed new major league in Europe that was going to consist of the richest clubs from the continent's top league. So, like the Premier League in England, for example, was going to send a few teams to the Premier League, or to the Super League, or rather, the owners of, say, Chelsea, Liverpool, were going to join this league. And unlike other, tournaments or competitions in Europe, like Champions Cup, I believe, where there is promotion and relegation. Teams need to play to get into them. They can lose the right to compete in them. It was going to be closed. I think 15 or so founding clubs were going to have permanent status in the league, and there was going to be revenue sharing. So it was effectively a mirror of the NFL, Major League Baseball, the kind of cartel-like system and monopolistic system that we have here. And the reason fans revolted is because it felt like an abrogation of everything that was sacred about their sport in as they had come to understand it. So the ties to the community, right? The responsibility to the community above any responsibility to profits for shareholders or for owners. It felt like an affront to the integrity of what they loved and what they had built communities around.
And here it sounds like, okay, that's just a major league. I
Right.
reached over to, I happen to have within arm's length the book, The Lords of the Realm by John Hellier, which is basically the history of the behind the scenes of baseball and the formation of the National League, the American League, the Federal League, the Players League, all these, right up until this edition is up until the strike of 1994. But in America, they're monopolies, and because of the antitrust exemption, they're able to get away with stuff. And I was reading that going, wow, that must be what sports must be like without an antitrust exemption, that you could actually, you're not allowed to just operate any way you want. This is the best time of the year to be a sports fan, and PrizePicks is the best fantasy sports app out there. More than 3 million members agree. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. Just pick more than or less than on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. It's the regular season. We're wrapping up the first month, and you're going to see, are some of these players in a slump? Are some of the players on the Astros going to start hitting? Is Aaron Judge going to go on a tear? Is Juan Soto going to continue this up? And will Mike Trout continue to homer at will? Go more than and less than on any of those. And it's the NBA playoffs right now. Get in the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game on a new level during basketball's postseason. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions and special offers into the biggest moments in sports. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Once again, download the app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. Do you know what? In the end, it's that easy. There's a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I want to focus a little bit on the A's here because you do talk about being there for the reverse boycotts and the last dive bar, and it was at the Oakland 68s, and all the people who were there for the fabulous protests. I got a lot of A's fans listening to this podcast right now, and throw us a bone to say what good came from that. How can we look at that as anything other than screaming at the tides?
Two things come to mind. The first is, it feels like so long ago, but it was actually almost a year ago to the date that John Fisher announced that he had signed a binding agreement to develop a plot of land in Las Vegas. And when he did that, at the time, the narrative around why he was leaving Oakland was very different than it is now. It was felt, serenely here in the Bay Area that Fisher had systematically sort of deconstructed the A's as an organization, alienated fans, in that the reason that the A's attendance was so low, for example, was because of what had been done to the organization by its owner. But beyond Oakland, what people tended to see was just pictures of the Oakland Coliseum empty at first pitch. They would hear what Rob Manfred and John Fisher and A's president Dave Kaval said or insinuated about Oakland and its viability as a sports town in the press. And they just said, oh, well, the A's have to relocate because nobody goes to their games. Nobody cares about A's games. Nobody cares about Oakland sports. And one chief achievement of A's fans, the groups like Last Dive Bar and the Oakland 68s, who organized in a manner very similar to the way that fan groups do in Europe, is they changed that narrative. They forcefully refuted the misconception that Fisher and Kaval had sort of seeded in the public imagination, and proved for the historical record that the fans were not the problem. If anything, fans in Oakland are among the most vociferous fan bases in all of sports. And so that was proven. And I think that now that is the version of the story that will be remembered into posterity and into the record books. The second thing I think is they have impressed upon fans elsewhere the importance of organizing in their own context. Mm-hmm. And one reason that's important is because we are on the brink right now in America of another $1 billion subsidy boom for stadiums and for owners. And so the reason that John Fisher ultimately left Oakland, or rather, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable saying it's the reason. I'm not sure if he ever wanted to be here. But one reason that he would point to is that he was unable to get from Oakland as much public funding as he wanted for a lavish new stadium here. He needed a replacement to the Coliseum. You see owners doing the exact same thing in cities across the country right now. Their leases are up at the stadiums that they had built for them in the early 90s after Camden, the construction of Camden Yards. And so what you're going to see is this cycle of owners attempting to extort fan bases, often under threat of relocation. You see it happening in Chicago. You've heard the owner in Arizona suggest that they'll have to leave Phoenix. You have the owners of the Royals and the Chiefs in Kansas City who, just won the Super Bowl saying, well, if we don't get to extend the sales tax to pay for a new stadium here, if the public doesn't fund a new stadium, maybe we'll leave too. So the importance of fans banding together and advocating for themselves, that was proven here in Oakland, and rather a potential model for it, I think, was suggested here in Oakland, because what the A's fans would have never been able to make the kind of waves that they did nationally if they had just done it alone, or rather if they had been scattered. But the fact that they were organized and centralized, I think what other fan bases, I hope, take away from that is we don't need to put up with poor treatment from our owners, and here's how we can push back.
All right, Dan Moore, we have so much more to talk about, and you have so much more hope to give us. No pressure. But as we wrap up here, Dan Moore, could you tell us where can we find you on the social media, or read your great stuff that you do for The Ringer?
I'm on all the social platforms at Demo Writer. Also have a website, www.danmorewriter.com. And then, of course, you can find my most recent stuff on The Ringer. And I've also written on Baseball Prospectus, and I have a piece coming out in The Atlantic shortly. Anyway, more info than you asked for. Demo Writer on social is probably the best spot.
And please, people, support platforms like The Ringer or The Athletic, where you can actually read thoughtful and in-depth articles about sports. Not everything has to be in just 100 characters or whatever. Talking about the A's, talking about Fisher, and the glories of the A's 60-year run in Sacramento starting next year. This has been a Locked On A's, Locked On MLB crossover. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.